Hey, hey, kids cook real food. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where, as always, my goal is to connect you with experts who have the information you need to raise those healthy children. Today, I'm so honored to have Tsao-Lin Moy here. She's an acupuncturist out of New York with a ton of other experience. And we're going to talk about a very important topic of immunity, how we can best support our kids and our whole family's immunity and keep that going and rolling throughout the long winter, at least in New York and Michigan, where we are. It's a long winter once it gets going. Thank you so much for being here, Cho.
Thank you.
So today, again, we're talking about immunity, but I just want to give you a little bit of an insight into Cho's background because she has such a depth and breadth of background and experience. She's an expert in alternative and Chinese medicine. She's the founder of Integrative Healing Arts, which utilizes Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and energy healing to treat patients. And what I love is that she's got such an integrative approach with both ancient Eastern philosophy and healing methods, but also supporting Western scientific paradigms of health. And it really is a powerful combination that helps the patient learn how to heal so they can take charge of their own health, which is so cool. Cho has a ton of experience helping women get pregnant, even women over 40 naturally, which again, families are, that's so important just to support the family. And I love that so much. So lots of fertility work, although that's not our topic today, but it's neat to know that it's there. And she has a long list again of certifications and media experience. Everyone is turning to Cho with questions like this one, like how do we get that immunity up and keep it up? But I want to hear a little bit about your background, Cho. You actually started off in the corporate world. What brought you over to Eastern medicine?
Well, everybody asked me that question. Well, the corporate world just had, a limitation in terms of serving. There's a point where you find yourself on like a kind of hamster wheel and or a cog in a wheel, and not really feeling like you're making a difference.
Mm,
And once you recognize that you're not serving a greater purpose, there's something else says, okay, I want to do something that it has meaning, that I can help as many people, and also that I will never be bored with. It's something
mm,
that is a lifetime of learning. And really a big part of it too is empowering people with their own health, so that they can be in charge of their health. A lot of people feel disempowered, like they just
mm.
have to sit and wait for someone to figure out for them how to be better or to be healthy, which is great that you have this podcast where people actually learn what they can do with food, like things every day that are all around us. And I think this is really important that people know that,
Yeah.
that they have all the tools that are right there. And so that is a big part, kind of going, wait a second, we all have this capability. How can I help people with that? Because it's
Nice.
very rewarding, when someone can heal themselves or get pregnant naturally, or I mean, it's a big deal.
And I'm so happy to be able to share this platform and our audience with you to do what you love and to make this difference. And I love what you said, just empowering parents to understand that they have resources at their disposal to help their family. And so I mentioned already that you sort of balance the Eastern and Western medicine. So just so we kind of know what that means, can you sort of define each end and how you find the middle ground, which I think is kind of a lonely place. It can be a little divisive. So I'm really happy that you're balanced.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that when people come and see me, they've often found that let's say Western medicine has failed them. That
Mm,
model of what we call broken and fixed. That's where there's when you're sick, okay, how can we cure you? Versus understanding that overall health is really important, and there's an aspect of prevention. So it's not like either or one or the other. It is really about a paradigm and an idea that if you are working on your overall health, if you need to, take a little bit of a painkiller to help you, okay. But you want to also look at like what is the underlying cause of that, and address that so that you're not just dependent on, like, and basically you stay underlying not well. And so what it is when you do an integrative approach is wherever you are, you use what you need, but the bigger picture is really like your health and wellness, and that
Mhm.
also translates into immunity. Immunity is one part of our whole system, right?
Right.
So we can really pinpoint, oh, I get sick all the time, or I have allergies, but that is a symptom of, like, oh, how is your overall health? And we really want to look at the big picture. And so, Western medicine or science has one, it's like one pair of glasses with a prescription that can only look at it from a particular angle,
Mm.
but there's more to it than what they're seeing. So to just take one path, or believe that that's the only path, that is when people find out that it's not working. They don't understand why. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Mhm.
So, and then a lot of people find, let's say, cures or ways of healing themselves, which are outside of that model,
Mhm.
and because they do exist.
Sure.
So you have to take both into consideration, right?
Yeah.
So, like, let's say patients that come to me and they're undergoing, let's say, chemotherapy, they have cancer. Okay, I would never tell them don't take the medication. What
Mhm.
I can do is help them get through it, with the nausea, with the pain, to actually use other things that are natural to help support them to get through that process, right?
Mhm.
So there's a time and a place for everything, so that this is where, like, understanding where that meets. And so that's something that I help my patients sort out for them, what's going to work, because we really have
Mhm.
to look at what is going to work for them so that they can be compliant, that they can do it, um, that it has a simple answer. Usually the more complex something is, the answer is simpler. So we take a look at, like,
Mm.
well, what is that? And one of those things, like sleep, if you're not sleeping, of course you're not going to be well, right?
Mhm.
Like, those are those things we got to look at. Okay, what can we do? At least look at, focus on a couple of things that we can really do.
Yeah, I love that you're finding that balance and you're not discounting Western medicine. We're not throwing out
Right.
the baby with the bathwater, but we're kind of
Yeah.
expanding. Okay, this is a fix. Now, what else can we do to help your whole body be in good health? And also, I think one thing that Western medicine's not great at is that whole preventative aspect of, like, okay, you're not sick, nothing's broken, but how can you treat your body well? How can you set yourself up for a lifetime of good health? And that's kind of our goal today. We want to really help parents understand kind of how to see potential problems in their family that might affect short-term or long-term health, and really gain the practical strategies. I'm all about the practical, just to avoid illness and to recover
Sure.
quickly, when we are knocked down. We're recording this during the pandemic of 2020, and so in these times, like, we cannot emphasize enough that worry and stress and sanitizing everything in this attempt to, like, gain control might do just the opposite, right? Because some of those, worry and stress in particular. But what do you think, Cho? Should we focus more on physical health or mental health?
Well, that's a trick question because they are both intertwined. You experience in your physical body everything, your emotions, your thoughts. They're
Mm.
all, like, it's all one thing. They're not, like, outside of you. And recognizing, that our thought, what we think, can raise our blood pressure.
Yeah.
It can cause a migraine. There's so many. It can create problems with digestion, uh, anxiety, not sleeping. So we know that our mind and body are really one. You can't, like,
Mhm.
take it out, like, put it on the side table when you go to bed, or put it on your desk over here. That it's very much connected. And definitely, more research that is being done with that, brain and gut
Mm.
access, more and more we're looking at the nervous system as part of digestion and circulation, all of those things, not just one, they're
Mhm.
all intertwined. And
And I
so that's
love
the idea.
that. Yeah, I love that about what you do because I think in a strictly Western model, you go to one doctor for your mind, you go to one doctor for your body, you go to another doctor for your heart, another doctor for your gut. And that's really not fair because we are all one body and totally, need to be
Sure.
in balance. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, so before I went to school for acupuncture, I started out in massage therapy, and then then I realized this is only the beginning. And one of the things that you realize is that your skin is like the largest part of your nervous system, and your
Mhm.
nervous system is your brain too. So whatever we experience on the outside, it really like does this feedback. And so if you say like only one part of me, there is really not one part of you. We just talk about it that way, right? So that means, and that's good news because then you can do other things that affect the whole of you. Like everything we do actually affects the whole of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about what someone's health pattern might mean. That's a phrase I've heard you use. How can we use this idea of understanding the mind body connection, especially when we think about, we as parents helping our kids reduce the impact of stress on our kids' health?
Okay. This is a great question. A lot of my patients right now, extremely stressed out. They have
Mhm.
children, have to pivot, work from home. First time, maybe, especially the women. The burden has been more on the women to
Mm.
organize the home and the schooling if they haven't already been doing something like that. So it's been very stressful. And one of the things that happens is children pick up on not the verbal cues, but they pick up on your mood, let's
Mm.
say. They really pick up on those things. So when we're stressed out, they sense it and they don't know what's wrong. Oftentimes they think they did something wrong. So they can become very nervous. So the more nervous a parent is and anxious about the future, the more the kids pick that up and then they will act out.
Mm.
So important is in this situation, and it which really sheds a light on this dynamic. As a parent, it's really important to make sure that you are checking off all the boxes, that you have sleep, you're getting exercise, the nutrition, all of those things, so that you are stable and can be like that rock for your children.
Mm.
Right, so that's the idea of you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, fast, and then to the children, but really recognize that it's important not to sacrifice yourself, like, oh, I'll stay up all night working, and but really to say like, no, we need to have these boundaries where we go to bed
Mhm.
on time, and really including, like, include the children into the cooking. The
Yep.
children pick up on our habits, as you see, like with generations, that they may continue to do the same thing their parents do. You see it in families,
Mm.
and because it's learned at such a young age.
Sure.
Yeah, so taking care of your health and really making that a let's say a learning experience, right?
Okay. So, I mean, in some ways, we're saying that we're passing on our habits to our kids. We're saying
Oh
kind of
yeah,
our stress is contagious in a
correct.
way. And so, if we want our kids to have reduced stress, we've got to start with ourselves. And so, you're talking tone of voice, posture, facial expressions, all our
Sure.
stress, even if we're trying really hard to not seem stressed, there's probably some tells, probably some
Just tell.
sneakiness in our body.
Exactly. There's definitely their tells. And one of the things that like humans can kind of fake, they can kind of fake with each other a little bit, but you can never fake your mood with animals, right? They pick up
Mm.
right away. And it's the same thing with children. Like you
Mm,
really, you have to kind of like be it. And it doesn't mean like you pretend everything is okay. It's completely normal to get overwhelmed and stressed and have the
right.
feel those things, and then really to lead by example of what you do. So instead of going and eating a bunch of junk food, is really like, okay, this is what I'm going to do to satisfy my appetite. This is going to help me have better energy, all of those things, and including the children in the process. Um, and the other thing too that I recognize, especially in New York, I don't know if it's the same in Michigan, but I think it's with all moms, right?
Mm,
uh Perfectionism. Like there's this idea that you have to be perfect, you have to be perfect. And that is something that creates immense stress, and also
mm,
like shielding them from this horrible thing that's going on around the world. It's important to talk about like we're in a situation, and really be calm about it, right? So, and the same thing with everything is really you're the adult, and so lead by example.
mm.
And then that has a calming effect on on children, right? Lead by example.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Thinking about making good choices for myself can help my children to be more calm. Anyone wants more calm children. I know, Cho, you often speak of stress addiction, and with all
Yeah.
this stress going on, I mean, we live in a pretty stressed out country anyway, pandemic aside. But how would we know if our own stress has like tipped into an addiction? And then if we do identify that, what do we do about it?
Okay. Okay, so one of the things, adrenaline is a hormone. It's that
Mhm.
fight or flight.
Yes.
And that like can motivate people. If you wait until the last minute to do something, and then suddenly you're like cramming for an exam, and what happens is that if you're tired also, you might go and grab a cup of coffee, you get the jolt of energy, and then you go, 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 go. But then after an hour or so, there's the crash.
Sure.
And what happens is that people become what I call addicted to it, but it's a kind of behavior like I've always done it this way before. I don't need the sleep. I can operate on, 3 hours of sleep, or I'm going to stay up late to get something done. And we're seeing more of that
Mm,
because of, people working from home, at
sure.
least definitely here in New York. And because of, taking care of children, and every all the activities at home, is that they're eating into things like their sleep. And
Mm,
then they're also maybe not exercising, grabbing fast food because it's going to be convenient. And ultimately, that creates a vicious cycle. As you know, like sugar, you want more sugar. You get the
yeah.
high, you get the low. And what that does is it triggers a kind of behavior where you're tired and wired, we would call it.
Mm,
And then in order to get motivated, it's really like taking more things that will stimulate you. And even the thoughts, like scary thoughts, get people motivated. Oh, if I don't get this in, what's going to happen to me, right? So this is this kind of behavior to not get out of it. First of all, not recognize that they're in the loop,
mm,
but also because there's that feeling of the adrenaline rush, like they suddenly get the energy. That is that kind of a, I call the addiction, because if you're
mhm.
tired, wow, suddenly you get a lift up that feels great, and you kind of want to live there all the time.
Sure. I can totally see this in myself. Just to give a practical example, I always say, and when you said, well, when you always say, just I do this way because I've always done it that way, I'm like, oh, I think she's about to talk about me, because I always say that I'm a deadline girl. I don't get stuff done well without deadlines. And that's that stress of like working under a deadline. I will know at the beginning of the day on a Monday that I have two things that are the most important things I have to do that day. And what do? I do all the other things. I'm right. I keep busy. I work hard. I love that feeling of being busy. And then it's 8 p.m. and I should be winding down, spending time with my husband, blah, blah, blah. and I have these two things still left hanging over my head. So what does that make me do? Well, it makes me do it. And then I hate it because I'm working and I'm frustrated and grumpy, but I'm also, right, stress addicted and running on that adrenaline instead of just like being a proper adult and prioritizing my day. So that's a practical example of how you can get into that wheel.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
It's a it's a way of feeling motivated because you feel the energy, and then that seems to inform being motivated. It's a interesting experience. And then because you do it right away, like really fast and get it done, then that is, because you actually have success in getting it done,
Right.
then that becomes that's the way I always do it. And so it's really hard to step away from, doing something a little differently.
Hmm.
And that's the challenge. That's really the challenge.
And
Especially for
that's why,
mom.
yeah, that's why it feels good. When you look at that, you're like, well, Katie got a bunch done. That's awesome. Good
Yeah,
job. And it looks
computer.
positive, but you're saying if you're noticing those patterns, you need to tell yourself that's actually probably negative for my stress levels and therefore my overall health.
Yeah, over. And so that's one of the challenges, is that you might see it in a couple days, circles under the eyes or something like that, or the gaunt, because the stress hormones actually will cause like your collagen to break down. So, people who are really stressed out, you see that they have that, their face looks like, oh my God, they've been through something.
Oh no.
um, but over the long term, using that, it will not only affect sleep, but blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, like all of these things uh, contribute to the chronic illnesses. And that becomes very challenging because you can't make the connection like here to there. It's over like the long term, right?
Hmm.
And
So
especially sleep.
yeah, so we're talking about chronic illnesses. Of course, the immune system also a huge factor in acute illnesses or catching a seasonal virus or what have you.
Sure.
So we've talked about the mind-body connection. We've talked about
Yes.
how important it is to look at the whole body to not let our stresses become somewhat contagious to our children. Good
Yeah.
habits. We've talked about stress addiction. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times already in all of this sleep, which is perfect because of course the whole body, right? We can't talk about mind, body, or stress without talking about sleep. But specifically, sleep is massive in immunity, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, what can parents do to help their kids get the right sleep? And then, if you want to talk a little bit about that phrase sleep debt, that I think a lot of
Oh,
people sort of
sure.
rationalize their sleep debt.
Okay, so really important again, is shutting off the computers, shutting off the video games. um, Challenging, of course, now because everyone is doing their homework online,
Yeah.
right? Everything, and that has a lot of stimulation to the optic nerve and the nervous system. So even a couple 2 to 3 hours before, let's say, bedtime, really need to be off of those electronics, because there's a certain amount of time that it's going to take for that you know stimulation of the brain to kind of power down.
Sure. That's
And
so hard too because we recreate with screens. We recreate watching shows or YouTube or Netflix too. Now, would the orange glasses or the screen filter type glasses do anything to help in
yes,
this situation?
yes, I think it helps with the blue light,
Yeah.
because the lights from the computer screen or your phone
Hmm.
screen are ones that can definitely disrupt sleep.
Yep.
Important to go out during the day. We have something called a circadian rhythm. In Chinese medicine, we look at, or I'm sure people have heard of yin and yang. So there's the idea of the day and the night. There's a time to be active. There's a time to be resting.
Yeah.
There's the summer. There's the winter. There's the spring. Like, so very seasonal. So really, uh, living according to nature. So naturally in the wintertime there's less light, so we tend to want to hibernate, kind of like we go inward, we're a little more tired because there's not as much light. And this is something that we would use, very important: go outside, get sunlight, fresh air,
Mhm.
vitamin D, right? Because those are also for immunity. Kids need to run around and discharge their energy. They
Mm,
need to play, they need to move. It's good for their coordination and again, and their brain development. They
nice.
really need to physically, their physical is their mental,
Mm,
right? So when kids can't sit in a chair for hours, they start squirming because they just need to move. You know, their
mm,
bodies are growing, right? This is like a really like the metabolic, we could call it the energy, the metabolism is moving, their brain is developing,
yeah.
and so they physically, that's why they physically need to move. It is a physiological biological thing, that's a phenomena that's happening. And so it's really good, you know, they take breaks and go out and run around, so they discharge that energy. Otherwise they're constantly wiggling, you know, wiggling. But at the same time you're looking at, they're getting some sunlight too,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
then that later on is going to help them with sleep, because you need, you know, people who don't have good vitamin D, um, they know, um, they have a lowered immunity.
Yeah.
But also it's important for bone growth and development. Also for us, you know, adults, you know, we need for our own, you know, bones and strength. So
Yeah.
this is really like enough sunlight, and then uh, the darkness, right? So as evening starts to come in and the lights go down, which is like another thing of why you turn off the screens
Mm,
and you lower the lights,
mm,
that triggers in your body to start manufacturing the melatonin. And melatonin is known as, it's known as the hormone of darkness, which actually as it gets darker it triggers the production, so that when it's time to go to sleep you'll have a deeper restorative sleep.
nice.
So
Now,
part
not melatonin, the capsule that you would take, right? Am I
Yes,
am I correct in saying please do not read that as give your kids melatonin at night?
you don't have to give melatonin to kids. They will make it. Usually, kids need a lot of sleep. You know, they
Yeah.
do need sleep. They get cranky if they're not sleeping. During sleep is also when there is the growth hormone, which is
Mhm.
really important for kids to grow, and also for adults and
Okay.
elderly, because growth hormone is what has to do with tissue repair,
Mm,
and also removing what we call the metabolic waste. It also that comes the inflammation and the things that build up in the brain. So
okay.
one night, so getting to you know, one night of poor sleep, our brain actually accumulates the amyloid, not the plaque, but it's the amyloid chemicals, which they find are in Alzheimer's and in dementia
Ooh,
after one night of poor, like not sleeping enough. And
wow.
so this we get into one of those things, if you can't catch up on your sleep on the weekend.
Which stinks.
Yeah. I mean, if you do pull an all-nighter, that is one thing, but you have to make sure to recover the next within a certain period of
Mhm.
time, so that it doesn't continue to build up in the system. So that is one, you know, one of those myths of like, oh, I sleep on the weekend. If you need a certain number of hours of sleep, let's say in a week, you really need to have them, you know, every day kind of spread out, not like sleep all weekend, up all week.
Right. So that's
Type-
planning for failure. To actually plan, I mean, sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes you stay up too late and maybe you want to catch up on the weekend, but don't make that your goal. Don't make that your excuse. Oh, I sleep on the weekends. This is how I set up my schedule. No, that's a failed schedule when it comes to sleep, right?
right. And then that goes back into that addiction to stress
Mm,
thing. If you're like staying up later and later, like eating into the time when you need to rest, because then what happens is you don't get the restorative sleep.
yeah.
And so then that becomes the what we call, what you were asking about, the sleep debt.
Mm,
And over time, poor sleep then goes into those more chronic diseases, and especially, you know, something like blood sugar fluctuations,
mm,
and contributes to diabetes. And you know, something like 42% of the population is obese. Like it contributes to the obesity because metabolically you're not able to rebalance. And so these are like these things like, why should I sleep? And sleep is an activity. Like I think that is
Mm.
one of the things that people like, I'm not doing anything, when I'm sleeping. But in fact, you're doing a lot. And that's the thing is but that's why it's so important to like, I need, you need to really get sleep just as much as you would, need to, get up and go to work. Right.
Sure, or exercise or eat right. I mean, we work really hard putting a lot of time into some of these health concerns, but if we're forfeiting sleep because of it, it's probably not a very good exchange. And
Yeah.
parents, I really want to pull back to the fact that Cho has been giving you free ideas, right? Sunshine is free, movement is free, getting enough sleep is free, turning down the lights. Like these are not expensive or difficult habits. It's just about, I mean, I love what you said about kids need to move to discharge. And that brought us back to, right? We talked about the mind body connection, that what we think affects how we feel in our body. It goes the other way. What we do with our bodies and the energy we discharge and the getting our wiggles out and getting our sunshine on our body also goes up to the brain and helps it function better and helps it sleep better. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, you know what what I'll tell you is, and I'm sure it for anyone who has children, if they saw, the sonogram, right, and you see that the how fast the movement is of all the limbs, it's like a running, and what that is the nervous system is firing off, and the movement is actually like, having the muscles and the bones develop through all of those movements in
Mm.
utero. And so, children are still developing. And so it's a similar thing, they run, they jump, the muscles do, gentle kind of tugging on the periosteum, which then stimulates the bone growth, the coordination, like all of those things are still happening, right, with the kids, which is why it's so important that they get involved in activities, and that they're much better at like having being able to focus when they get a chance to play. And all, intelligent life, one of the things is that they play.
Mm.
So with playing you learn, right? Like the mama wolf may, like show, or the whale shows, like runs around and plays and does stuff, and that's developing those skills.
Wow.
So that's something that playtime is not considered not learning. It is actually a form of learning.
Yes, mamas. So pat on the back when your kids are playing, when they're mimicking you, when like give them free time to play. Again, free activities, easy to do. Kick them outside, old fashioned like we did. Tell your teachers at schools, don't forfeit recess, right? Even when it's cold and snowy. I'm just fascinated by everything we talk about. A lot of times when we talk about in utero, there's 3 trimesters, and people have started saying, oh, there's a 4th trimester that we need to discuss that in that first 3 months of life. And I kind of hear you saying, there's a 5th trimester too, because the entire time children are developing, they're still continuing to do some of the same processes that were happening in utero. It's
Oh,
fascinating.
sure. Absolutely. They know, like, this is, we're not really fully formed in our brain until our late 20s, at that
Yeah.
frontal lobe. And so this is an opportunity, they're learning. And really, when you involve the physical, which is the kinesthetic, like you can, if you just tell someone, this is how you knit, versus, okay, just do it. Like if you're cooking with kids, if they're just going to sit there and watch you, is very different than if they pick up the bowl and they
Mhm.
start like doing it, and feeling and smelling and tasting the or sticking their finger and feeling the textures and stuff like that, that they are really learning so much more of a skill,
Mm.
like an apprenticeship. Someone who does apprenticeship, it's, hands-on experience, right?
Mhm.
Life is
Oh,
an experience. We're all, we're learning.
Yeah, you're speaking my language for sure. I mean, at Kids Cook Real Food, we are all about getting those kids in the kitchen and getting those experiences. I like that you mentioned the tactile and how important that is to learning. Also, I love helping kids take control, take ownership of their own health. I see parenting as this 18-year journey where I'm slowly letting go of my control and my choices and teaching them hopefully to make good choices. It's good for me to remember too that brains aren't fully formed till the 20s. That's why our teenagers make terrible decisions sometimes. It's kind of not completely their fault. That's what we're here for as parents, right?
You're not gonna learn. It's really, they gotta learn. Like, it's very challenging, of course, uh, to explain to someone, like, if you do this, it's dangerous, until
Yeah.
they, fall and they have that real experience,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so
That
they get it. They really get it. You just wanna, you just hope that they don't, hurt themselves.
Yes, I know. We have a whole interview with Jessica Leahy, the author of The Gift of Failure, on how failure can be as important for kids to experience. What would you say, Cho, to kids like let's say maybe 8 to 12, 8 to 15, about how they need to understand like how to start off right with their habits so that they don't have to work so hard like many of your patients are probably trying to reverse bad habits and regain their health. How do we teach our kids to claim their health now?
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is
Just
uh
the introduction. Obviously,
okay,
that's a
the
whole interview
introduction.
in and of itself, but
I actually just thought of something when you said to 12 years old. Then I'll go back. Okay, so one thing is that, that definitely, drinking water, like, that's going to be important. The exercising, expressing their feelings, right?
hmm,
Eating vegetables, like, really. And I think, yeah, and with the thing with, like, plant food, and also I know everyone, they love the junk, like, the sugar, the all of that. Um, I think that the more they learn about, let's say, nature, let's say growing their own food, I think is, like, so important to learn, like, gardening, that they learn about plants, they can learn the nutrition of it. That I think that, gives them a connection
hmm,
to it. So that's something that I would, say, like, to really, observe, uh, and get involved with. Younger kids, it's harder to articulate it, and they would get it. But when, kids that are like 10 to 12, that they can actually make a connection, to that, to, like, help out in doing things. Like, kids learn, one of the great things for kids to do are, like, sort socks,
hmm,
to do matching of socks. Like, that's an activity, right? That they learn what's the same, what's not the same. That's actually, there are a lot of things that kids can be involved in, that it's not for adults, wherever possible, to help the parents and to be involved, like,
hmm.
as much as possible. Uh, and again, like, growing food is a science thing too.
Yeah.
You learn about the soil, you learn about the sun, you learn about the whole cycle, like, all of those things. And, with plants, a lot of people don't know this, but why are, eating vegetables so important? And we share what's called, biounity, biological
Hmm.
unity. So the plants that are in our environment also have natural immunity to viruses and bacterial infect, like, all of those things. So when we eat those, plants, that we actually also access that immunity that they have. So it's
Wow.
more than, just the vitamins that come from it. There's something called bio, unity, that we have, biological unity with plants.
That's great. That really pulls it back to, our topic on immunity. That was perfect, Joe. Thank you. So, how awesome is that to explain to kids, right? We do all these things, particularly now in the pandemic. Everyone actually knows that they should wash their hands, which is new to some people, crazy. But yeah, if we're washing our hands, we should also be putting these good foods in our bodies that can build our immunity right from nature. Amazing.
Yeah, it's like that, the old, they don't have it anymore, but the old cartoon with Popeye eating
Yeah.
spinach, and everybody wanted to eat spinach. Now, for 12-year-olds, what I would say, This is something that I did with my daughter. And there's this book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the son of Stephen
Stephen
Covey,
Covey. Yep.
who wrote The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And when my daughter was 12, I actually happened to buy it because I wanted to read it to see like what was in it.
Yeah.
And she got very interested because it talked about teens. So, like 10, 11, 12-year olds are really interested in what teens are doing, like the older teens. And
Mm-hmm.
so she got it was, I think it's better than the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, right? That to the concepts
Okay.
of really like your time and thinking with the end in mind
Mm-hmm.
and seek to understand first and win like so these ideas about cooperation and also there's time management and seeking excellence and improving on yourself, right? So not about perfection but really about learning more and doing better based on your own, like you personally, not competing with somebody else, which I think is really at that age with social media and middle school that can be very, very
Mm-hmm.
challenging.
Yes, yes, for sure. We're just about out of time, but so many great nuggets, so many pro parenting tips in this show. And I always like to end with a message of hope, like to end with something really uplifting. So if you could encourage parents in one way, what would you want them to remember?
Well, what I would want you to remember is that you survived your parents. So, um, whatever you're going to be doing is going to be better. I mean, that's what and the fact that, if they're listening to your podcast, that they're already doing better because they're learning about ways of parenting and going outside. And that's what's really important. And they're modeling that, right, to their children just by, what they're listening to and those things. So that's something that they don't have to try to be perfect, but to really just know that what they're doing now is the best that they can, and they're also obviously seeking to do better, and that's just that's what's important, right?
Mm-hmm. Not to be perfect, but just to try, and you're already trying,
You're
which
already
is
doing it. Yeah,
making a
yeah,
difference.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Because it's important. Like you are enough. I mean, that's the big thing. So yeah, whatever improvements you can do little by little is going to make a big difference.
Beautiful. Cho, thank you for that encouragement and inspiration. We'll make sure that people can find you all over the web. Anywhere we share this video, we'll share
Yeah,
links to
that's
your
great.
website and your information. I just really appreciate you taking the time. I hope that parents are inspired and have these practical tips and boot your kids outside. Parents, get off the screen at the end of this interview and go get some natural light or go to bed, whatever time you're watching this, right?
Yeah,
Take care of
absolutely.
ourselves. So I will see you again next week, Kids Cook Real Food community, with another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector. Thank you.
Thank you.